Okay, students, this is a video lecture on the chapter on the city sustains itself. So I want to start off with just a few objectives for this particular chapter. So the first one is to explore the complexity of urban sustainability issues and then the policy remedies that are often associated with sustainability, particularly vis-a-vis cities. And I'll just caution you at the outset, there is a PowerPoint that I posted on Oaks, has 6 slides in it that is going to link to websites that demonstrate some of the policy remedies. They're examples of policy remedies. I can't include them in the video, obviously, and in the voice thread, I can't click out of a voice thread to a website. So I just have to post them there, and you'll have to go in and look at them as good examples of policy remedies. The second objective is to identify the possible impacts of technology on urban form, which is discussed a little bit towards the end of your chapter. Okay, so let me start off by just talking about a few things. So your chapter starts off with the example of the reusable cloth diaper that is discussed. And they use this example to sort of get you to see a very simple idea of using cloth diapers rather than the plastic and cotton ones, the disposable ones that people use. You know, when you have a disposable diaper, you obviously the baby's producing waste, but then you're producing much more waste in the environment because you have the plastic and cotton diaper that's very resource intensive. So people said go back to like the way they did in the old days and use the cloth, right? Just have a piece of cloth that the baby wears. When they soil themselves, you can just wash that cloth. You don't constantly have to be getting a new diaper that you pay money for and that has plastic and everything in it. Now, this is a good thing. The article or the chapter starts to talk about why it's good, because it does reduce the amount of non-degradable paper that is in our landfills. So you think, oh, that's a good thing. It is good. But it is bad because it also is incredibly energy intensive. There's indirect energy use from the wash machines that you have to turn on to wash these cloth diapers. That energy is mostly from a non-renewable source. You know, electricity could be burning coal or some other thing that's fueling the wash machine. And then the detergents could have they used to certainly have high phosphorus content, which was of course bad for the environment, and this could cause excessive algae growth and suffocating the life in lakes. So the idea behind this example is to show you think you're doing one thing that's good for the environment and it's sustainable, but it turns out you are actually generating a whole host of other energy or costs on the environment. So the authors wanted you to see that complexity a little bit with the starting examples. Now, the other point to sort of bring in here is that linkages among the natural and built systems, the natural environment and the built environment, tend to be highly complex. And it is true that there is a great deal of scientific uncertainty about the impact of one on the other. What is not in doubt is that our climate is warming and that human activities are contributing to that warming, aside from what the president says right now. But when you get down to a more granular level and you start looking at the impact of the natural environment on the built environment and vice versa, there's a lot more uncertainty at those micro scales. So we are acting with imperfect information, particularly as city planners and urbanists and policymakers, people who may be interested in thinking about how we make cities more sustainable. Now, the complexity and interrelatedness of environmental phenomena tend to defeat partial or narrow solutions. So, you know, because there is so much interrelatedness, if you do one thing, it's likely that it is defeated by some other impact that you haven't foreseen. So the example that is discussed in the book, this is just one example, there are others, but is the moving of solid wastes. So you can imagine here in Charleston, we have dumps up on Bees Ferry Road and in other parts of the city. But in other bigger cities like New York, they send their hazardous waste or their solid waste over great distances to dispose of it. And this is very costly. Not only is it costly in money, but it all is also hazardous for people as it travels around. And then it also prevents people from seeing the impact, like what am I doing, the impact of my throwing stuff away on the environment as we go and hide the garbage somewhere else. So, the idea is to think about, you solve one problem where you have garbage accumulating, you go and put it somewhere, and maybe you're putting it somewhere away from people so it doesn't have an impact on them. But of course, there's a tremendous cost to doing that, and these are very interrelated. So it's one example to help you start thinking about this. The other key point that your authors ask you to think about is the scale of a policy intervention, or the scale of a problem. Now, with regard to the problems, the extent and the severity of consequences, scale is very important. So you can imagine, think about trying to tackle pollution in Mexico City, which is a mega city. I mean, it has 20 million people. It's spread over acres and acres and acres of land, probably the size of maybe 30 Charlestons put together, maybe even more than that. So it's very different to try to solve or come up with solutions in a city like Mexico City than it would be in a city like Charleston. The types of pollution are going to be different. The way you think about tackling pollution is going to be different. So scale matters when you try to think about sustainability. Is it sustainability for the city that you're going to have a policy, or are you trying to foster something at the micro level of people in their everyday lives, or both, right? And you have to think about where you're pegging your policy intervention. Now, scale is also important with regard to processes, to decision processes involved in solving problems. So the example, and we're seeing a lot of this debate right now in the national discourse with President Trump backing out of the Paris agreements on climate change and trying to limit the greenhouse gases that we are contributing to global warming here in the US. Now, you can think about asking a company to produce more sustainably, but then you have to, this is a scale question, you ask an American company, and this is certainly what Trump is saying is the discourse for backing out of the Paris Accords, but you ask an American company to produce more sustainably, but then how do they compete against companies somewhere else that are not being asked to do so, or that have much more lax regulations where they don't have to meet a very stringent environmental standard? The argument that Trump is giving you, and certainly others in our country, is that you are now unfairly hampering our companies, and then their only alternative is to either raise prices or to go out of business, which means Americans are either suffering by losing their jobs, or they're going to be paying more for products that would otherwise be the case. So we're essentially funding the mechanisms of combating global climate change. Now, I don't want this to sound as an excuse for backing out of the Paris Accords. I just want you to think about the complexity and the political mobilization that can occur when you don't pay attention to scale, that you really need to look. We can ask someone to do something here, but how are they being affected by something very far away? And your book talks about the importance of this, this dimension. Now, there are some policy remedies for thinking about sustainability in cities, and your book talks about this, and then I'm going to ask you at the end of this to go to the PowerPoint and look at the examples that I found to clarify these. But there are several remedies for sustainability, or to promote sustainability. The first is new technologies, coming up with new ways to do things that are allowing us to be more sustainable. So you can think about green building. This is the LEED standard, which is a certification. Formal certification from a professional organization. It's characterized by judicious use of building materials, selecting materials that are going to give you high energy efficiency, trap heat, trap cool air, so you don't have excessive energy costs, use products that are not damaging to the environment. Then there are also ideas of product life cycle considerations. So shifted design trends try to minimize waste during production and over an extended duration of a product's usefulness. So you can think about, as a water heater deteriorates over time, which it will, what is that going to mean for when the person takes it out and throws it away or sends it to, what is going to be leaching into our environment as it further breaks down? So people are starting to think about, we're putting these things into homes which tend to last for a long time, but as they break down, what is the impact of their breakdown on the economy? The sort of third one for for a new technology is clean energy generation. And this is one that is really sort of focused on thinking about ways that we can. Natural gas is one that we've certainly moved to. That's not completely clean energy, but there is definitely a move towards thinking about ways that we can have energy supplies, wind power, solar power, water power again, that can help us not have a very great energy demand, or we can meet our energy demands but not have a very deep impact on the environment. I should say that a lot of solar power is another one. A lot of these also do have environmental costs. They're just less than using a recurring natural. If you're extracting resources that are not going to recur from the earth, that could be problematic, like oil or coal. Once we run out of those sources, we're not going to have them, and plus they're very intensive in terms of greenhouse trapping gases that they emit. The second policy remedy is physical planning, and this is the idea of this is where planners are most active, trying to contain sprawl and protect open space. So the idea that we can build more compactly so that people don't have to drive everywhere. And then you can also reuse central urban spaces so that you're not always, we have tons of spaces. Think of the neck area of Charleston that had some light manufacturing at one time, and now it's just empty lots. Why are we not building there, but yet we're sprawling out to Bees Ferry Road and beyond? Now, some people would say that those sites are contaminated with industrial toxins, but we can clean those up, and we should, and then redevelop those areas. The third area of a policy remedy is just direct regulation. The example that I use is the American Clean Air Act, but you can regulate, this is for people who are interested in the policy side of urban studies, you can come up with regulations that will focus on limiting the impact of certain activities on the environment. Then there are market devices, so you can think about trying to shape the market in certain ways. Sometimes this is done with the regulation aspects, but it can also be done with just trying to build very attractive places that are, if you have a quality urban environment that you've designed, you are going to bring residents and businesses into a more compact area rather than having them sprawl out to the distance. The fifth area is leadership. So you have to recognize the role of our leaders, our visionaries, the people who are elected to office, or the private business leaders who are not elected to, or educators for that matter, who are helping establish a vision for communities. And not, it doesn't just have to be leaders, it can be people in their communities that are helping to establish a vision of sustainability and helping their community see that this is important. Now, very often we look to elected leaders, and we should, because they get the most visibility and they have the power of the bureaucracy that they can shape. But I want you to think about the leaders and the vision that is articulated. Right now, we're not seeing much of a vision on sustainability, at least from the national level. So we're hoping that we're going to see more of the localities and states pick up that mantle. The last area that is discussed is to actually change the curriculum in public schools. This is possible within the city government. If you are in the urban policy stream, you can think about educational policy, which most cities, if it's not the city, the county, will have control over that curriculum. Sometimes the state mandates it, but a lot of times the locality has some influence. They can infuse sustainability into the actual education that children are learning from the time they're in elementary school right on up till they graduate. You probably know here at the college, we've now adopted our quality enhancement plan for the next 10 years, which we are focused on sustainability. That's going to be infused into our curriculum. So I want you to think about that role. It doesn't have to be at the college level. It's great that it is. It can also be at the high school and lower levels of education, and our city leaders can influence that directly. So there are 6 things. You have a PowerPoint that gives you links to specific examples of each of these. So it's on your checklist. You need to look at that. Now, the next part of this is I just want to talk a little bit about the impact of technology on urban form, because that is a big area that people are interested in the future. And just some things I'll say about this. If firms can access information and move products from and to anywhere in the world, now that we have advanced cyber systems and we have advanced infrastructures for movement, transportation, location may no longer be that important. But keep in mind that we did discuss earlier in the semester, and you had a chapter on this, the importance of location for our urban agglomeration economies, which is still important, particularly for the high order businesses like finance, where you need to be close to people to seal the deal or learn from them. But for some of the other parts of our economy, like the manufacturing parts, location isn't that important anymore. Some people have argued that the city will be in a state of decline as a result of technology as we go into these advanced stages of technologies. And you can imagine there are costs and benefits involved in being located in the city, and technology may affect this equation. So if costs outweigh the benefits of being in the city, people will locate elsewhere, particularly if it's easy to do all the things they used to do. They substitute technology now, and they don't have to be in the city. So individuals being in a city does facilitate learning from each other, which rises their wage premium, right? So there's still that idea that you want to be close to each other if you're an individual, because you can learn, and that may boost your wages. But firms, they have a higher cost of doing business in cities. There are intangible costs, traffic, pollution, but again, they have a benefit of being accessible to a larger labor pool, suppliers, business service providers, their labor force, etc. And then also firms do learn from each other through competition. So there are benefits. There are centrifugal, which means pushing away from the city forces, but then there are those centripetal forces that may keep businesses here. Many futurists argue that a virtually connected electronic cottage will eventually eliminate the need for downtown offices in the central city. And you can see this in the rise. There has been a movement to edge cities around major metropolises, where people kind of move out to the edge, and you have like a little business district there. And advanced technology allows the production to be moved to any location where labor costs are lowest. So we're sort of in this moment where we're seeing a lot of push to businesses to leave cities, but we're also seeing a lot of forces that are keeping them centralized. So in your lifetimes, this tension will be playing out, and certainly in the next few years, you're going to see some of the impacts of this. Now, there are also those who argue that the city will be ascendant as a result of technology. It's really going to enhance city life. And this is this point about, think about codified knowledge. That's knowledge that's written down, which you can go look up in the internet or you can look up in a book. But there's also knowledge. There's tacit knowledge, which is like, it's as if you were in the meeting and you see the person sweating on their brow. Maybe they're like nervous about something. You can't get that over the internet. I'll just tell you guys, for example, right now I'm wearing this nice shirt, but I'm wearing shorts underneath here. I'm just wearing the shorts that I wear outside. So you can't see the whole dynamic when you're doing something purely online. This is tacit knowledge that you get from being there, the creativity. People argue even in the classroom that something is removed by all of you being separate in a way, and not in the classroom where you're engaging with each other and meeting each other and talking to each other, and you're close to me where you can ask me questions immediately right after class or during class, etc. So keep in mind this difference between codified knowledge, the idea that anyone can go look something up, but there is still something valuable about tacit knowledge, which comes from being close together and proximal to that person. And then the last idea on this idea of tacit knowledge, and some people say that the city, the technology is allowing people to. Some people are going to go away. They're going to leave the city, but it's also allowing a lot of new information to be flowing in cities, and then you have the added benefit of people still being close together, where they can still talk and interact with each other. And this really allows the production of a lot of new knowledge and new ways of being and new sales ideas or new product ideas that can then be brought to market. Cities that don't do this, that are not continually producing new knowledge, those are the cities that are going to go the way of Detroit and see a lot of decline. So some people argue that the city will decline as a result of technology. Others argue that technology is really enhancing some cities because it's allowing a lot of information to flow, and then when people are still together, they use that information and they discuss that information, they do things with that information in very creative ways in that tacit knowledge form that are not possible, that is not possible if you are doing everything remotely online. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's video, this module's video lecture. I want to come back to the objectives and just remind you what we set out to do. You want to explore the complexity of urban sustainability issues and policy remedies. There is a PowerPoint, guys. You've got to go on that PowerPoint, look at the examples. I listed out the policy remedies there, and I gave you a link to each example of them. And then the last objective for today was to identify the possible impacts of technology in urban forms. So just think, is it going to be a centrifugal where the city disperses, or is it centripetal where everything gets focused in? There are sort of two different camps on how this is going to work out. Good luck with the rest of the module, guys.